The floorboard creaks under Nora Harper's desperate fingers. Moonlight streams through faded curtains, illuminating a bedroom frozen in time, a child's sanctuary untouched since 1974. Dust motes dance as she pries at wooden planks in the back of the closet, her breathing shallow, hands trembling. "Please," she whispers to no one, "please, be here." The board gives way. Beneath lies a small plastic object wrapped in faded cloth. A child's handwriting on yellowed paper reads simply, "For Mom." Nora's fingers shake as she lifts the dust-covered tape recorder, different from the one that vanished with her daughter a decade ago. After scavenging batteries from the kitchen drawer, she presses play. Static crackles through the small speaker before giving way to a sound that stops her heart. A little girl's voice, preserved like an echo from another lifetime. "Hi, Mommy. This is my secret recorder. I hide it because..." The voice drops to a whisper. "I'm scared." What she heard next would unravel a decade of lies and reveal the horrifying truth about the night her daughter vanished. If you're captivated by mysteries like this one, be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. That said, let's get right into the story. Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, was the kind of town where everyone claimed nothing bad ever happened, until it did. In the summer of 1974, its tree-lined streets and white picket fences created a postcard-perfect image of American tranquility. Children rode bikes until streetlights flickered on, and neighbors gathered for weekend barbecues where gossip was served alongside homemade lemonade. The Harper home sat on Sycamore Lane, a modest two-story with blue shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. Inside lived Nora Harper, a dedicated nurse at Willow Creek General, her husband Tom, whose hands perpetually smelled of motor oil from the garage he managed, and their 8-year-old daughter Lila, whose imagination stretched beyond the confines of their small town. Nora noticed the changes in Tom that spring, the distant gaze, the prolonged silences, the way he retreated to his workshop after dinner instead of helping with Lila's bedtime routine. She attributed it to stress, the struggling economy, the slow deterioration of something she couldn't quite name. Lila existed in a realm of her own creation. For her 8th birthday in February, her parents had given her a tape recorder, a bulky Panasonic with large buttons, perfect for small fingers. It rarely left her side. "It's for my important stories," she'd explain solemnly, recording elaborate tales of princesses who saved themselves and dragons who weren't really evil, just misunderstood. What Nora didn't know was that Lila had a second, smaller recorder, a hand-me-down from her cousin that she'd received at Christmas. This one she kept hidden, her secret keeper, for thoughts too precious to share. On July 14, 1974, the evening unfolded like countless others before it. Dinner was meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Tom was quieter than usual, excusing himself early to make a phone call in the garage. Outside, storm clouds gathered, promising summer rain. "Can I record a special story tonight?" Lila asked, her recorder already in hand as Nora tucked her into bed. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "Just one, sweetie. It's getting late," Nora said, checking that the window was securely latched against the coming storm. Lila's voice filled the room as Nora kissed her goodnight. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who knew secrets about the people she loved. At 2:17 a.m., Nora jolted awake. The storm had intensified, rain lashing against the house in angry waves. Something had woken her, a metallic sound, like a latch clicking shut. She listened, heart pounding, before convincing herself it was just the wind. Tom's side of the bed was empty. He'd mentioned working late at the garage to finish a transmission repair. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight cutting through dissipating clouds. Nora pushed open Lila's door with a coffee mug in hand, ready for their morning ritual of breakfast planning. The bed was empty, covers thrown back. The window, the one she distinctly remembered latching, stood open, curtains dancing in the breeze. Rain had soaked the window seat, creating a small puddle on the hardwood floor. Lila's prized tape recorder was gone from its usual place on the nightstand. What followed was a blur of panic and disbelief. Neighbors formed search parties within the hour. Police arrived with German shepherds that sniffed Lila's pajamas and circled the yard, confused by the lack of trail. The previous night's storm had washed away any footprints that might have marked an intruder's path. Detective Robert Winters, a weathered man with kind eyes and methodical habits, led the search. "The rain complicates things," he explained to Nora, as officers photographed the bedroom. "No footprints, no fingerprints on the window that we can use." Tom arrived home from work, face pale with shock. While Nora collapsed into tears against a neighbor's shoulder, Tom stood eerily still, asking questions with clinical detachment that neighbors later described as unnatural for a father whose child was missing. Over the following weeks, Tom's behavior grew increasingly suspicious. He participated in searches but often disappeared for hours without explanation. He avoided reporter interviews and seemed uncomfortable with the community's support. When the local church organized a prayer vigil, Tom refused to attend, claiming he couldn't bear it. By August, the search efforts dwindled. The FBI agents, who had briefly assisted, returned to their field office. Tip lines went silent. Detective Winters continued to visit, but his expressions carried the weight of diminishing hope. "We're not giving up," he promised Nora one evening, as they sat on the porch, the summer fireflies emerging like distant stars. "But I need to be honest, after this much time without clues." Nora nodded, understanding the unspoken truth. In the months that followed, Lila's disappearance became a footnote in local papers, then vanished altogether. The mystery of the girl who disappeared during a thunderstorm joined the quiet tragedies that small towns carry like ghosts, present but rarely acknowledged. By Christmas, all that remained was an empty bed, an open case file gathering dust at the precinct, and a mother who still listened for footsteps that never came. The first Christmas without Lila arrived like a thief, stealing what remained of normalcy in the Harper household. Nora set the table for three out of habit, then stared at the empty chair until Tom gently removed the extra plate. They exchanged perfunctory gifts beneath a tree Nora had decorated, despite Tom's objections. "We can't just pretend it's a normal Christmas," he'd argued. But Nora insisted, not for celebration, but for preservation, as if maintaining traditions might somehow keep Lila closer. Lila's presents remained wrapped under the tree until February, when Nora finally placed them, still unopened, in her daughter's closet alongside the birthday gifts she continued to buy each year. Lila's room became both shrine and time capsule. Nora refused to change anything: the unmade bed with bunched sheets, the open drawer with pajamas half pulled out, even the glass of water on the nightstand that slowly evaporated over months. She dusted around objects rather than moving them, preserving the last arrangements of her daughter's hands. Tom couldn't bear to enter the room. "It's not healthy," he told Nora one night after finding her asleep on Lila's bed. "Keeping everything like this won't bring her back." "And packing it away will?" Nora challenged. The argument ended like most did those days, with heavy silence and separate bedrooms. Tom retreated further into himself. His workshop behind the garage became his sanctuary. He installed a lock on the door and spent evenings there, sometimes until dawn. When Nora questioned him, he claimed he was working on a restoration project, a vintage motorcycle that would be worth something someday. The phone calls began in March. Nora would pick up the receiver to hear silence, then a click as the caller hung up. When she mentioned these to Tom, his face tightened. Probably kids playing pranks, he dismissed, but the calls always came when he was home, as if someone was checking on his whereabouts. One April night, insomnia led Nora to the kitchen window, where she witnessed Tom burning papers in the backyard fire pit. When she confronted him the next morning, he claimed they were old bills and junk mail. But Nora had seen him carefully checking each page before feeding it to the flames. Their marriage, already strained before Lila's disappearance, began unraveling like a sweater caught on a nail. They moved through the house like ghosts in parallel dimensions, occupying the same space without truly seeing each other. Tom's absences grew longer, his explanations vaguer. In May, Nora discovered a motel receipt in Tom's jacket pocket. The date coincided with a weekend he'd claimed to be at an auto parts convention in Pittsburgh. When questioned, he erupted in unprecedented anger. "I can't breathe in this house anymore. You've turned it into a museum of misery." Summer arrived with painful familiarity, the same climbing roses blooming along the fence, the same neighbor children splashing in backyard pools, everything unchanged except for the gaping hole in their lives. Lila would have been 9. By July, the whispers in town had evolved from sympathy to speculation. At the grocery store, conversations halted when Nora approached. At church, women clutched their children closer when Tom entered. Detective Winters continued his weekly visits, but his questions had shifted subtly, focusing more on Tom's whereabouts on the night of the disappearance. "Have you noticed anything unusual about Tom's behavior?" Winters asked Nora over coffee one afternoon, careful to keep his tone conversational. "He's grieving," Nora defended automatically, though doubt had taken root months earlier. "Different people grieve differently," Winters acknowledged. "But in my experience, there's grief and there's guilt. They look similar, but they're not the same." The one-year anniversary of Lila's disappearance arrived with a small mention in the Willow Creek Gazette. The local television station aired a brief segment asking for renewed attention to the case. A handful of new tips emerged, all leading nowhere. That evening, Tom and Nora stood on opposite sides of Lila's room, the gulf between them wider than the physical space. "We need to move forward," Tom said finally. "Not forget her, but find a way to live." "How?" Nora's voice cracked. "How do I live not knowing where she is? If she's safe, if she's even—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "She's gone, Nora." Tom's voice was flat, certain in a way that sent ice through her veins. "Holding on to this room, these things, it's killing us both." "How can you be so sure?" Nora whispered, studying his face. "Unless you know something I don't." The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken accusations. 2 days later, Nora returned from her shift at the hospital to find Tom's dresser drawers emptied and a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this anymore. I'll send money for the mortgage. I'm sorry." No explanation, no forwarding address, just the quiet abandonment of a life too painful to maintain. What do you think happened to Lila? Share your theories in the comments below. Spring 1984 arrived in Willow Creek with the same reliable beauty that had mocked Nora's grief for 10 years. At 42, she had settled into a life defined by absence, the space around which she carefully constructed each day. The mirror reflected the physical toll of her journey. Premature gray streaked her once auburn hair, and fine lines mapped the terrain of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. She still worked at Willow Creek General, finding comfort in the predictable rhythms of the hospital and the gratitude of patients who knew her only as the kind nurse with gentle hands. Every February 12th, Lila's birthday, Nora maintained her ritual. She would request the day off, bake a small chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, Lila's favorite, and add a single candle to the collection stored in the kitchen drawer. 18 candles now, marking the years her daughter should have lived. Tom kept his promise to send money, but the predictable check stopped arriving 6 months earlier. After several unopened letters were returned, Nora contacted the bank, learning that the mortgage payments were 3 months behind. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday, an official letter explaining she had 90 days to vacate the only home Lila had ever known. That evening, Nora drove to Detective Winters' small ranch house on the edge of town. Though retired for 3 years, Robert Winters remained her most consistent ally in the search for answers. "I've been meaning to call you," he said, ushering her into a living room cluttered with fishing gear and case files he couldn't bring himself to abandon. "I heard about the foreclosure. I'm sorry, Nora." She waved away his sympathy. "I need to know where Tom is. His check stopped, and the bank can't or won't tell me anything." Winters hesitated, then retrieved a folder from his desk. "I've kept tabs on him. Old habits," he admitted. "He remarried 2 years ago. Lives about 2 hours north in Millerton. Works at a dealership there." The news shouldn't have hurt after so many years, but Nora felt the sting nonetheless. "Has he ever mentioned Lila?" "Not to anyone who'd tell me." Winters poured 2 fingers of whiskey into mismatched glasses. "Nora, there's something I should have told you years ago. Professional ethics kept me quiet. But now that I'm retired..." He passed her a glass. "I always suspected Tom knew more than he said about that night. His behavior in those first few days, it wasn't right. Too controlled, too prepared." "You think he was involved?" The question she'd been afraid to ask for years finally escaped. "I think he knew who was, but without evidence." Winters sighed. "The case is still open technically. My replacement reviews it annually, but without new information." "I understand," Nora said, though understanding had never eased the pain. Driving home, she passed the "For Sale" sign hammered into her front lawn, a physical manifestation of loss upon loss. Inside, cardboard boxes waited in the hallway, a reminder of the impossible task ahead, dismantling a life preserved for a child who never returned to claim it. The upstairs hallway stretched before her like a path to execution. At its end, Lila's bedroom door remained closed, as always, preserving the sanctity of the space beyond. Nora had entered only to dust, to replace the teddy bear that sometimes fell from the bed, to whisper updates to a daughter who couldn't hear them. Now, she had to pack away these treasures, deciding what to keep and what to relinquish, each choice a small bereavement. Her hand rested on the brass doorknob, cool and unyielding. Beyond this threshold lay the most tangible evidence that Lila had existed, her books with dog-eared pages, her collection of polished stones, the solar system mobile still hanging from the ceiling. With a deep breath that did nothing to steady her, Nora pushed open the door. Dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through blinds she'd never closed, illuminating a room where time had stood still while the world beyond continued its relentless forward motion. The faded floral wallpaper still bore Lila's crayon marks near the light switch, her 8-year-old attempt to measure her growth. The bookshelf held her favorites: The Secret Garden, A Wrinkle in Time, the complete collection of Nancy Drew mysteries that Nora had been slowly acquiring for birthdays and Christmases. Each object Nora touched released memories like perfume. The stuffed rabbit missing one ear from being dragged everywhere for 3 years, the science fair ribbon for Lila's project on butterfly metamorphosis, the jewelry box containing plastic beaded necklaces, and a single real pearl earring found at the Code playground. Nora placed these treasures in boxes with the care of a museum curator, labeling each with detailed descriptions of their significance. The task consumed her for hours, each item requiring its own moment of remembrance, before being wrapped in tissue paper and tucked away. By dusk, she had managed only the desk and bookshelf. The closet remained, the final frontier of preservation. Inside hung dresses Lila had outgrown before her disappearance, and others Nora had purchased in the years after, imagining her daughter growing into them. Kneeling on the closet floor, Nora began removing shoeboxes containing keepsakes, birthday cards, school assignments, the Mother's Day necklace made from painted macaroni. As she shifted a box of winter boots, something caught her eye, a slight unevenness in the floorboards at the back corner. Running her fingers along the edge, she felt a slight give. One board seemed purposely loosened, its nail heads sitting just proud of the surface. Using a hairpin from her pocket, Nora pried at the edge until the board lifted, revealing a small cavity beneath. Inside lay an object wrapped in Lila's favorite pink bandana. The note attached, "For Mom," was written in her daughter's unmistakable handwriting, the letters formed with careful precision. Nora's hands trembled as she unwrapped the cloth, revealing a small silver tape recorder. Unlike Lila's primary recorder, the bulky Panasonic that had vanished along with her, this was a compact model, easily concealed in small hands. Confusion mingled with hope as questions flooded her mind. If Lila's recorder had disappeared with her, how was this one here? When had she hidden it? And most importantly, why? The device felt impossibly heavy in her hands as she searched her memory. She'd never seen this recorder before, had no idea where Lila might have acquired it. The batteries would certainly be dead after a decade if they hadn't leaked and corroded the interior. Nora rushed to the kitchen, fumbling through drawers until she found a package of AA batteries. Returning to Lila's room, she sat cross-legged on the faded carpet and carefully opened the battery compartment. Miraculously, the previous batteries had been removed, preventing damage to the device. With shaking fingers, Nora inserted fresh batteries and closed the compartment. The small red power light illuminated, a technological resurrection that made her breath catch. Pressing the rewind button, she listened to the mechanical whir as the tape spun backward to its beginning. Her thumb hesitated over the play button, suddenly afraid of what she might hear. Whatever was recorded had been important enough for Lila to hide, important enough to label specifically for her mother. Taking a deep breath, Nora pressed play. Static filled the room, followed by the shuffling sounds of small hands adjusting the microphone. Then, a voice that made Nora's heart constrict, the voice she'd preserved in memory but hadn't truly heard in 10 years. Testing, testing. Lila's whisper, followed by a childish giggle. "This is my secret recorder. Cousin Jenny gave it to me, but nobody knows I have it. I keep it for special secrets." The recording continued with mundane observations, Lila's thoughts about school, complaints about a girl who teased her, excitement about an upcoming field trip, ordinary moments of a child's life, precious in their banality. Then the tone changed. April 16th. Uncle Joey came over again while Daddy was working late. He brought me a chocolate bar but said it was our secret. I don't like secrets with Uncle Joey. He sits too close. Nora's blood turned to ice. Joseph, Tom's younger brother, who had moved away shortly after Lila's disappearance. The same Joseph who had been so helpful during the search, organizing volunteers and putting up flyers. The recording continued, documenting several more visits, each described with increasing unease. Then came an entry, dated July 13th, the day before Lila vanished. "I'm scared to tell Mommy about Uncle Joey's secret game. He said nobody would believe me because Daddy doesn't even believe me. But I'm going to be brave tomorrow. I'm going to tell." Static interrupted the recording, followed by whispered words that chilled Nora to her core. "Mom, if something happens, look in Daddy's special box. He doesn't want me to know about the bad things." In the background, a man's voice called Lila's name, too distant to identify clearly. The recording ended abruptly. Nora sat frozen, the recorder clutched in white-knuckled hands as tears streamed down her face. The implications crashed over her in devastating waves. Joseph, Tom's knowledge, Lila's fear. After a decade of hoping for answers, the truth began to take shape. A truth more horrifying than the uncertainty that had haunted her for years. The recorder in her hands was no longer just a relic, it was evidence of a betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. Rising on unsteady legs, Nora placed the recorder carefully in her pocket. The grief that had defined her existence for 10 years transformed into something new, a white-hot determination that burned away the fog of sorrow. Someone had taken her daughter, someone had known why, and they had let her spend a decade drowning in questions they could have answered. If this story has kept you entertained, hit the like button and subscribe for more mysteries. Dawn found Nora in Tom's abandoned workshop behind the garage, a space she'd avoided since his departure. Dust-covered workbenches and specialized tools hung in precise arrangements, evidence of the methodical man who had shared her life, and, she now suspected, concealed crucial truths. "Daddy's special box," Leila had said. The workshop seemed the logical place to start. Nora methodically searched cabinets and drawers, finding nothing beyond automotive manuals and fishing catalogs. She checked for false bottoms in drawers, tapped walls for hollow spaces, and lifted floorboards that looked newer than others. Hours passed with nothing to show but filthy hands and increasing frustration. As morning stretched into afternoon, Nora sat on Tom's workbench, exhausted. What had Leila meant? What kind of box would contain bad things that Tom wanted to hide? The answer came as she glanced at a framed photo still hanging on the wall, the only personal touch in the utilitarian space. It showed Tom and Leila at the fishing cabin by Willow Creek, a small property Tom had inherited from his father. In the picture, 8-year-old Leila proudly held a fishing rod while Tom pointed to something outside the frame, his face turned away from the camera. The fishing cabin, of course. 30 minutes later, Nora drove down the overgrown dirt road leading to the cabin she hadn't visited in years. Tom had claimed the place as his personal retreat early in their marriage. The small structure looked weathered but maintained, its windows intact and porch recently swept. Someone had been here, and recently. Using the spare key hidden under a false rock, a hiding place unchanged for decades, Nora entered the musty interior. Surprisingly, the cabin showed signs of regular use. Clean dishes in the rack, fresh firewood stacked by the stone hearth, a jacket hanging by the door that she didn't recognize. The main room held a small kitchenette, a worn sofa, and a circular dining table. A narrow hallway led to a single bedroom and bathroom. Nora searched systematically, starting with obvious hiding places, closets, cabinets under the bed, before moving to more creative possibilities. In the bedroom closet, she noticed the floorboards didn't extend completely to the wall. Prying at the edge revealed a small gap, just wide enough to insert fingers. With a firm pull, a section of flooring lifted, revealing a metal lockbox about the size of a shoebox. The box was secured with a combination lock. Nora tried Tom's birthday, then his father's, then Leila's. The tumblers clicked into place. Inside lay a collection of items that confirmed her worst fears. Photographs of Leila that police had claimed were missing from the family albums, newspaper clippings about other missing children in neighboring counties, and a small leather-bound journal. With trembling hands, Nora opened the journal to find Tom's distinctive handwriting filling its pages. The entries began 3 months before Leila's disappearance. April 2nd, 1974, caught Joey watching Leila through her bedroom window tonight. Confronted him. He claimed he was just checking if she was asleep before coming in to see me. Something feels wrong. April 17th, 1974, Leila says Joey has been visiting when I'm at work. Says he brings her candy and plays special games. Asked what kind of games. She wouldn't say. Called Joey to tell him to stop coming over unannounced. He laughed it off. May 8th, 1974. Installed new locks on Leila's window. Told Nora it's because of the break-in down the street. Real reason is Joey. Caught him outside Leila's window again last night. The entries continued, documenting Tom's growing suspicion of his brother and Leila's increasing anxiety around Joseph. Tom described confrontations that went nowhere, threats Joseph dismissed, and his own internal struggle between family loyalty and protecting his daughter. Then came the entry dated July 15, 1974, the day after Lila disappeared. "She's gone. Police everywhere." Joey called offering to help search. His voice sounded wrong. When I mentioned the open window, he knew which one before I said. He knew. God help me. I think he took her. Subsequent entries revealed Tom's private investigation, following Joseph, searching his house while he was at work, finding nothing conclusive, but becoming increasingly convinced of his brother's guilt. Then a devastating entry from September 1974 found Lila's recorder in Joey's garage, hidden in a box of old tools, confronted him. He broke down, admitted everything, said it was an accident. He only wanted to scare her into keeping quiet about his visits, said she threatened to tell Nora about the special games. He panicked, put his hand over her mouth. She stopped breathing, said he buried her in the woods behind his hunting cabin. What do I do? Turn in my own brother? Tell Nora our daughter is dead because I didn't protect her from my own family? Joey swore it was an accident, begged me to help him. What kind of monster am I becoming? Nora felt physically ill, tears blurring the words as she continued reading. The next entry, dated December 1974, changed everything. She's alive. I went to the cabin to put flowers where Joey said he buried her. Found a hidden cellar, heard crying. She's alive. Joey lied. He's been keeping her there. When I confronted him, he threatened to kill her if I told anyone. Said he'd blame it all on me. That police already suspect me. Said no one would believe I didn't know. He's right. How do I explain knowing where she is after all this time without admitting I've hidden the truth? I'm trapped, but I'll find a way to save her, somehow. The remaining entries documented Tom's impossible position, visiting Lila secretly when Joseph allowed it, bringing her food and books, promising a rescue he couldn't deliver. Joseph had constructed an elaborate system of manipulation, using Tom's complicity in the initial cover-up to ensure his continued silence. The final entry, dated May 1979, read simply, "She's gone. Cabin empty. Blood on the floor. Joey claims she attacked him and ran, says she's probably dead in the woods. I don't believe him. I'm going to find her. If I do, we're never coming back to this place. I'm sorry, Nora. I failed you both." Nora closed the journal, her mind reeling. Tom hadn't taken Lila. Joseph had. Tom had discovered the truth, but became trapped in his brother's web of threats and manipulation. Instead of coming forward, he'd tried to manage the situation himself, making catastrophic choices that compounded the original crime. At the bottom of the lockbox lay a single sheet of paper with an address in the neighboring town of Millvale, Joseph's current address, according to a utility bill dated just 2 months earlier. Hands shaking, Nora reached for the cabin's telephone and dialed Detective Winter's number. When he answered, she struggled to keep her voice steady. "I found Lila's hidden tape recorder," she began, "and Tom's journal. I know what happened. Joseph took her. Tom found out, but didn't tell anyone. And Robert, the journal says she escaped. She might still be alive." Winters' response was immediate. "Don't do anything. Don't go anywhere near Joseph. I'm coming to you. Where are you?" "Tom's fishing cabin," Nora replied. "But Joseph lives just 30 minutes from here. We need to—" "Promise me you won't confront him alone," Winters interrupted. "Joseph is dangerous, Nora. If what you're saying is true, he's been carrying this secret for 10 years. Men like that don't simply confess when confronted." But as Nora hung up the phone, she knew she couldn't wait. Not when her daughter might still be out there, not when the man who had taken her lived just miles away. Placing the journal and tape recorder in her purse, Nora started her car. Joseph Hall had stolen 10 years from her family. She wouldn't grant him another minute. Joseph Hall's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, a well-maintained ranch with blue shutters and meticulously trimmed hedges. Wind chimes tinkled from the front porch, and a garden gnome smiled vacantly beside the front steps. It was the home of a man with nothing to hide. Nora sat in her car across the street, watching. She'd called Winters from a gas station, leaving a message with his wife about her destination. He would come, but she couldn't wait. Not anymore. Before she could reconsider, Nora approached the front door and rang the bell. Footsteps sounded inside, followed by the click of locks being disengaged. The man who opened the door was older, but instantly recognizable. Joseph Hall, Tom's younger brother, with the same cleft chin and hazel eyes. He'd gained weight since she'd last seen him, and his once dark hair had receded, but his smile remained the same, charming, disarming, practiced. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by surprise and something else, a momentary flash of fear quickly concealed behind renewed warmth. "Nora? My God, it's been years." His voice carried the same smooth cadence she remembered. "What brings you all the way out here?" "I was hoping we could talk," she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded when every nerve screamed danger. "About Tom and Lila." Joseph's smile faltered, only slightly. "Of course, please come in. I was just making coffee." The interior of the house was spotlessly clean, decorated in neutral tones with generic landscape paintings. No personal photos adorned the walls or shelves, no evidence of a life lived beyond the carefully constructed facade. "Cream or sugar?" Joseph called from the kitchen. "Black is fine." Nora settled on the sofa, placing her purse beside her, the tape recorder and journal within easy reach. Joseph returned with 2 mugs, placing one before her on the coffee table. "I often think about Lila," he said, his expression appropriately somber. "Such a tragedy. I still can't believe Tom never contacted me after he left you. We were so close." "Were you?" Nora took a deliberate sip of coffee. "Even after you took his daughter?" The question hung in the air between them. Joseph's face remained composed, but his knuckles whitened around his mug. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. "Lila was abducted. Some sicko took her from her bed. We all searched for weeks, remember?" In response, Nora withdrew the tape recorder from her purse and placed it on the coffee table. "Lila left this hidden in her closet the night before she disappeared. I found it yesterday." Joseph's eyes fixed on the device, his breathing shallow. "Some old toy. What does that have to do with me?" "She recorded your visits, Joseph, your special games, your threats." Nora pressed play, and Lila's voice filled the room, describing her fear of Uncle Joey and his unwanted attention. Joseph's face hardened as the recording played. When it ended, he set his mug down with deliberate care. "The imagination of children is remarkable, isn't it?" She probably recorded that after watching some crime show. Kids are so impressionable. "Then how do you explain this?" Nora withdrew Tom's journal, opening to the entry describing his discovery of Lila alive in the cellar of Joseph's hunting cabin. As Joseph scanned the page, his facade crumbled. The journal fell from his hands, and when he looked up, his eyes held a cold calculation that sent chills down Nora's spine. "Tom always was a detailed writer," he said, voice flat, creative too, especially when drinking. "Stop lying." Nora's voice shook with rage. "You took her that night. You tried to silence her because she was going to tell me about your abuse. When she fought back, you panicked and took her. Tom found out months later but was too cowardly to come forward, too afraid of implicating himself in the cover-up." Joseph's posture changed subtly, the cordial host vanishing, replaced by something predatory. "You have quite a story there, Nora, but it's just that, a story." Tom's pathetic attempt to shift blame from himself. "Where is she?" Nora demanded. "The journal says she escaped. Where did she go?" A cruel smile twisted Joseph's features. "If she had escaped, don't you think she would have come running back to Mommy? Maybe she didn't want to be found. Maybe she preferred her new life to her old one." The casual cruelty of his words struck Nora like a physical blow. "You kept her prisoner for years," she whispered. "Your own niece." "I protected her," Joseph hissed, his mask finally dropping completely. "Tom was neglecting her. You were always working. She needed someone who truly appreciated her." "You're sick." Nora reached for her purse, intending to leave, to call Winters from her car. Joseph moved with unexpected speed, grabbing her wrist. "You think you can come into my home with wild accusations and just leave? What's your plan, Nora? Go to the police? With what? A journal written by a man who abandoned his family? A childish recording that proves nothing? Let go of me." Nora tried to pull away, but his grip tightened painfully. "I should have known Tom would find a way to ruin things, even after all this time," Joseph snarled. "Always the responsible one, the moral one. Except when it really mattered. Did his journal mention how he helped me clean up that night? How he agreed to stay quiet to protect the family name?" "You told him she was dead," Nora said. "You manipulated him." Joseph laughed, a hollow, chilling sound. "At first, yes, but when he found her, he had a choice. He chose himself over both of you." "What happened to her?" Nora asked, desperate for the truth, despite her fear. "The journal says she escaped. Was that another lie?" Joseph's expression shifted, a flash of genuine anger crossing his features. "She got lucky. I got careless. 3 years ago, I left a window unlocked. She broke it and ran. By the time I got back from work, she was gone." "You expect me to believe she escaped after 5 years but never contacted anyone? Never tried to come home?" Nora challenged. "Home?" Joseph sneered. "What home?" Her father had abandoned her. Her mother had moved on. Besides, she wasn't exactly in a state to remember much by then. Isolation does things to a young mind. The implication that years of captivity had damaged Lila beyond recognition sent waves of nausea through Nora. "You're going to pay for what you did," she promised, voice steady despite her terror. "No one will believe you," Joseph said, pulling her closer. "It's been 10 years. Evidence disappears. Memories fade. It's your word against mine, and I'm a respected member of this community. You're just a grieving mother who never accepted reality." The front door crashed open. "Nora?" Detective Winters' voice called from the entryway, followed by the heavy footfalls of multiple people entering the house. "Nora, are you here?" Joseph's grip loosened in shock, allowing Nora to wrench free. "In here," she called, backing away toward the sound of Winters' voice. Winters appeared in the doorway accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. Though retired, he still carried the authority of his former position in his stance and expression. "Robert Winters," he introduced himself to Joseph, "former detective with Willow Creek PD. These officers are from Millvale PD. We received a concerning call about a historical missing persons case." Joseph regained his composure with remarkable speed. "This is a misunderstanding. Nora's upset, understandably so. She found some of Tom's old writings and jumped to conclusions." "I heard enough from the doorway to suggest otherwise," Winters said calmly. "Nora, are you all right?" "He confessed," she said, retrieving the journal and recorder from the coffee table. "It's all here. Tom's journal documenting how Joseph took Lila, how he found her alive months later, but was coerced into silence. And Lila's own recording from the night before she disappeared, talking about Joseph's inappropriate behavior." One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, we'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "This is ridiculous," Joseph protested. "You can't arrest someone based on a decades-old journal and a child's recording." "We're not arresting you yet," the officer clarified. "But given the seriousness of these allegations and the evidence presented, we need a formal statement." As the officers led Joseph toward the door, he turned back to Nora, his expression a mixture of rage and desperation. "She's not the same person anymore, Nora. Even if you find her, she's not your Lila. She hasn't been for a long time." The words were meant to wound, but Nora felt only resolution as she watched him being escorted to the police car. Whether changed by trauma or not, Lila was alive, After 10 years of believing the worst, that knowledge alone was enough to sustain her through whatever came next. What do you think will happen next in our story? Share your theories below. 3 weeks passed in a blur of police statements, evidence collection, and renewed investigation. Joseph remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk, and the severity of the charges. His initial denials had given way to partial confessions designed to minimize his culpability, claims of temporary insanity, accidents, misunderstandings. The hunting cabin yielded physical evidence supporting Tom's journal entries, modifications to create a soundproof cellar, chains bolted to the wall, a child-sized cot. Investigators found hair samples matching Lila's DNA profile, preserved from the original investigation. Most damning was the discovery of a hidden collection of photographs documenting years of captivity, evidence Joseph had been too proud or too disturbed to destroy. Tom remained unreachable, his current wife claiming he had left for a fishing trip the day after Nora visited Detective Winters. Whether coincidence or evidence of ongoing surveillance of Nora's activities, his absence complicated the search for Lila. Nora sat across from Detective Sandra Reeves, Winters' successor, in the Willow Creek Police Department. The office had been modernized since Nora's last visit years ago, computers replacing typewriters, the smoking ban evident in the absence of overflowing ashtrays. "We have potentially significant news," Reeves said, opening a folder on her desk. 3 years ago, a teenage girl was found wandering along a highway about 40 miles from Joseph's hunting cabin. She had no identification, appeared malnourished and disoriented, and couldn't or wouldn't provide her name or history. Nora's heart raced as Reeves continued. She was taken to a hospital, treated for exposure and malnutrition. When no one came forward to claim her, she entered the foster system under the name Jane Cooper, the name of the highway she was found on and the doctor who treated her. "That could be anyone," Nora said, trying to temper the hope threatening to overwhelm her. "Dozens of teenagers go missing every year." "True," Reeves acknowledged, "but this Jane had unusual scarring on her ankle consistent with long-term restraint. And when we showed her photograph to Joseph during questioning, his reaction was significant." Reeves slid a photograph across the desk. The girl in the image was around 16, with haunted eyes and hair several shades darker than Lila's had been. But the shape of her face, the slight tilt of her eyes, Nora recognized her daughter despite the changes. "Where is she now?" Nora whispered, unable to look away from the photograph. After several foster placements, she was adopted by a family in Oregon 2 years ago. "We've contacted them, explained the situation. They're understandably protective, but they've agreed to a meeting." 2 days later, Nora sat in a sterile conference room at the Oregon Department of Human Services. The social worker had explained that Jane, now known as Emily Carson, had been informed about the possible connection to the Harper missing persons case, but had limited memory of her early childhood. The trauma and years of isolation had created significant gaps in her recollection. "She may not recognize you," the social worker warned gently, "and she may not remember much from before her time with Joseph. The mind protects itself in cases of prolonged trauma." Nora nodded, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. "I understand. I just want to see her." The door opened and a young woman entered, taller than Nora had imagined Lila would become, thinner too, with a wariness that no 18-year-old should possess. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing the graceful neck and delicate earlobes that matched Nora's own. For a moment, neither spoke. The young woman, Emily or Lila, or someone between those identities, studied Nora with an intensity that suggested she was searching for something familiar in Nora's features. "Hello," Nora said finally, her voice barely audible. "I'm Nora." The young woman nodded slightly. "They told me you might be my mother from before." "Yes?" Nora resisted the urge to rush forward, to embrace the daughter she'd mourned for a decade. "But I understand if you don't remember me." "I don't remember much from before," she admitted, taking a tentative seat across from Nora. "Just fragments, a blue house, a porch swing, someone singing while brushing my hair." "That was me," Nora said softly. "I used to sing, 'You Are My Sunshine' every night while I brushed your hair. 100 strokes because you insisted that was the magic number to make it shine." Something flickered in the young woman's eyes, recognition perhaps, or the stirring of a deeply buried memory. "The doctors say I have dissociative amnesia from the trauma," she explained with clinical detachment. "Most of my memories from before age 13 are fragmented or completely inaccessible. My therapist says they might return over time, or they might not." "That's okay," Nora assured her. "Whatever you remember or don't remember, it doesn't change who you are now." "And who am I?" The question carried the weight of years spent without identity, without history. "You're whoever you choose to be," Nora said. "Emily, if that feels right to you. Lila, if you want to reclaim that name, someone entirely new. The choice is yours." The young woman considered this, her expression thoughtful. "The Carsons, my adoptive parents, they've been good to me, patient. They didn't push when I couldn't explain my nightmares or why certain things triggered panic attacks." "I'd like to thank them," Nora said sincerely, "for giving you what I couldn't during those years." "They're waiting outside," Emily Lila said. "They wanted to give us privacy, but they're concerned about how this will affect me." "Of course they are. They love you." "Do you?" The question was direct, piercing. "Even though I'm not the little girl you remember? Even though I might never remember our life together?" "With every breath," Nora said without hesitation. "I've loved you every day you were gone. I'll love whoever you've become, whoever you choose to be." The young woman nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "I hid a recorder," she said suddenly. "That's one thing I do remember. I was scared of Uncle Joey, so I hid my backup recorder under the floorboard. The one Cousin Jenny gave me for Christmas." Nora's breath caught. "Yes, that's how I found out what happened. You left a message for me." "I wanted you to know it wasn't your fault," she continued, the memory crystallizing as she spoke. "You always checked my window before bed. That night after you left, Uncle Joey tapped on it. Said he needed to talk to me about something important." The revelation that Lila remembered this crucial detail, the moment that had set everything in motion, felt like a gift beyond measure. "There's something else," the young woman said hesitantly. "Something I remembered recently in therapy, about Dad, Tom." Nora tensed, prepared for further revelations about Tom's complicity. "He visited me sometimes at the cabin, when Uncle Joey would let him. He brought books and told me he was trying to find a way to get me out, safely." Her brow furrowed with the effort of retrieving the memory. "He said Joey had threatened to hurt you if he told anyone where I was." "Tom knew you were alive," Nora confirmed. "His journal explained how he found you months after you disappeared. He made terrible choices, but it seems he was trapped in an impossible situation of his own making." "I don't forgive him," the young woman said firmly, "but I understand being trapped." 3 weeks later, after numerous meetings and careful coordination with Emily's adoptive parents and therapeutic team, Nora stood with her daughter outside the Harper family home, now sold to a young couple who had graciously allowed them a final visit before taking possession. "Anything familiar?" Nora asked as they walked through the empty rooms, their footsteps echoing on bare floors. Emily shook her head, then paused at the entrance to what had been her bedroom. "This was mine," she said. Not a question, but a statement of emerging certainty. "Yes." Nora remained in the doorway, allowing Emily to explore the space at her own pace. Emily moved to the closet, kneeling at the spot where Nora had discovered the hidden recorder. "I was so scared that night," she said, her voice distant with memory. "I knew Uncle Joey was planning something bad. I'd overheard him talking to someone on the phone about taking me somewhere where no one would look. That's why I hid the recorder with the message for you." She ran her fingers along the edge of the floorboard. "I recorded him too whenever he visited. I thought if I had proof, Dad would have to believe me." "You were incredibly brave," Nora said, fighting back tears. "Not brave enough to escape sooner," Emily said with a hint of bitterness. "It took me years to find the courage." "You survived," Nora countered. "That's what matters." As they prepared to leave, Emily paused in the hallway, her attention caught by a small mark on the wall, a child's height measurement preserved despite the new paint. "I remember this," she said softly. "You measuring me on my birthday. You said I'd grown an inch since Christmas." 2 inches, Nora corrected gently. "You were so proud." Emily smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face, revealing the child she had been beneath the guarded young woman she'd become. "I think I'd like to hear the old recordings sometime, the stories I used to tell. They might help me remember more." "Whenever you're ready," Nora promised. As they stepped onto the porch, Emily turned to Nora with newfound determination. "The police asked if I'd testify against Uncle Joey. I said yes. Are you sure? It would be difficult facing him again?" Emily nodded. There were others. Girls he talked about. Some he showed me pictures of. If my testimony helps find them or brings them justice, I need to do it. The revelation sent a chill through Nora. Joseph's crimes extended beyond their family, a predator with potentially numerous victims still unaccounted for. "We'll face it together," Nora promised, "whatever comes next." On the drive back to the hotel, Emily asked the question Nora had been anticipating. "What happens after the trial? The Carsons are my legal family now, but you're my mother." "We create something new," Nora suggested. "Something that honors all the people who love you. We take it one day at a time and figure it out together." For the first time since their reunion, Emily reached for Nora's hand, a bridge across the decade that had separated them, a promise of a future neither had dared imagine possible. 6 months later, Nora sat on the deck of her small rental cottage in Pacific Grove, watching the October sun sink into the ocean. She had relocated to Oregon to be near Emily while respecting the boundaries of her established life with the Carsons, who had welcomed Nora with unexpected grace. Joseph's trial had concluded with multiple life sentences, not only for Lila's abduction, but for crimes against 3 other victims identified through evidence found at his properties. The details revealed during testimony had been horrific, but Emily had faced them with remarkable strength, her testimony delivered with a clarity that left no room for doubt. Tom had eventually been located in Canada, living under an assumed name. Extradited and charged as an accessory, he had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against his brother. The 10-year sentence seemed inadequate to Nora, but Emily had expressed relief that the legal proceedings were concluded, allowing her to focus on healing rather than retribution. The sound of laughter drew Nora's attention to the beach below, where Emily walked with her adoptive mother, Sandra Carson. Their weekly visits had evolved into a unique co-parenting arrangement, imperfect but functional, with Emily at the center of a family expanded rather than divided by circumstance. In the evening stillness, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The grief that had defined her existence for a decade had transformed into something more complex, sorrow for lost years mingled with profound gratitude for this unexpected second chance. Emily climbed the steps to the deck, sand clinging to her bare feet. At her therapist's suggestion, she had begun recording her thoughts and memories, a modern version of her childhood habit that helped reconstruct the fragmented narrative of her life. "I remembered something else today," she said, settling into the chair beside Nora. "About the night before everything changed. I was recording a story about a girl who got lost in the woods but found her way home by following the sound of her mother's voice. You always did love happy endings, Nora smiled. I think that's why I held on to the idea of you, even when other memories faded, Emily continued. Not specific details, but the feeling of being loved. It was like an anchor when everything else was chaos. The admission, so simple yet profound, was more healing than any formal therapy or legal justice could provide. It suggested that despite Joseph's cruelty and Tom's betrayal, the bond between mother and daughter had endured, battered but unbroken by the intervening years. As darkness settled over the coastline, Emily switched on her recorder, no longer a secret keeper, but a tool for reclaiming her voice and reconstructing her story on her own terms. The quiet click of the button echoed across time, connecting the child who had hidden desperate messages under floorboards to the young woman determinedly rebuilding her life. In that moment, Nora understood that while the mystery of Lila's disappearance had been solved, the story of Emily's life and their shared future was still being written, one day, one memory, one recording at a time. Some secrets remained buried, others had found their way to the surface, but the most important truth had emerged intact. Love, like hope, could survive even the darkest circumstances. If you're captivated by mysteries like this one, be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a comment below, telling us where you're watching from.